moving on, we're going to bring Alex Corren up, who's talking, could have actually talked in a number of different tracks this weekend. He's talking on bioregional governance. For those not familiar, I think many in the room probably are, but for those not familiar with the concept of bioregionalism, national boundaries are arbitrary. They're made by people, but the world, the earth has its own natural segments and divisions, river streams and mountain systems, etc. And so unless we learn to steward those well as a collective of bioregions, we will be in trouble. So let's welcome Alex up.
So, I'm Alex Corren. I'm the CEO and co-founder of ReCommon, with an N. Talking today about building bioregional commons, governance, and impact mapping. And just by a show of hands, I'm curious how many people have had a similar dialogue before where, wouldn't it be great to get some land with a group of friends, put some tiny houses on it, grow some food, do that kind of thing? Curious how many people have had that conversation before. So that's kind of how this whole journey started for me. And of course, it goes way back, but really, when we started looking at that question, peeling back the layers, and especially zooming out and looking at the converging crises of our time, there was this question of what do they all have in common? Because on the surface, something like unaffordable housing, loss of topsoil, failing food systems, right? They might seem disconnected, but there's one thing that really does bring them all together, and that's the land. The very land that they're on, the place that they're on, how that land is treated, how it's used, how it's governed, how it's financed. That critical question about the land ultimately affects everything that happens on top of it, good or bad. And so at ReCommon, we catalyze systemic impact across bioregions with custom digital maps and consulting for regenerative projects. And the rest of my presentation is going to be essentially our journey that we took to get to where we're at now in 3 different chapters. The first 2 chapters have more text, and I promise there's a lot of pretty images coming at the end. And so this first chapter of ours is really looking at bioregional governance systems. And as Elliot was saying, bioregionalism is such a key component to this because as we acknowledge these failing systems and structures that are part of our civilizational design today, we need to look at what the replacements are going to be. And bioregions emerge as the natural organizing structures present in nature. And so what we started looking at is this primary tension in bioregionalism and how to organize around it. Because on one side of things, you have ecologically or nature scientifically defined bioregions. And then on the other side, you have bioculturally defined regions that are more human oriented. And sometimes people choose a camp, but I see it as they're both true. And so how do we create an adaptive system that can flex the way that nature does and honor the complexity present in natural systems? So we created this model, and this graphic shows the relationship between these scalable, almost fractal bioregional structures that anybody can organize and that can apply to the entire planet. So the core of it is the bioregional node. This is the default governance body that can emerge for any place on the planet and is the size of an ecoregion or a similar ecology. So where we're at now is actually the Northeast coastal forests. I grew up in this bioregion, but not in New York City, on the New Jersey side. And now I live in Colorado, a totally different bioregion in the Rockies. A federation or bioregional federation would be multiple bioregions coming together to work on common goals. So that could be like the entire Colorado River watershed. And then a bioregional hub is that's a more local place that has a more singular identity. Like New York City could be a hub of the Northeast coastal forests. And different action happens at different scales. A federation might be better for policy and lobbying in government. A node might be better for fundraising on an ecosystem scale. And the hub is where the action happens. It's where the shovels hit the ground. And just more of an example here, Where I live, this is the southern Rockies of Colorado, the entire Rockies forest on the left. Then on the right, there's a more biocultural area, the Front Range with Boulder and Denver, that crosses over these two distinct ecoregions. And then the Peak to Peak Hub is where I live now. It's a more local community in the mountains. So the other component, now zooming in a little bit, we developed this regenerative community land trust model, based off of the community land trust model itself, and it essentially expands to include any stakeholders that could be present in any given system. And real quick, running through them, the stewards are the leaseholders. They're the people that are actually on the land, whether it's for a house or a farm or a business. The elders represent rights of nature and indigenous wisdom, actually baking that into the governance model, giving them a seat at the table. The patrons are the investors that help put the capital into the land. Partners working within the node, the locals are also in the bioregional node. And moving on, bioregional commons funding. Ultimately, it doesn't matter how sexy your governance model is. If you need millions of dollars to get the land to even start, that's a big hurdle to overcome. And this question of how do you finance land without undermining the generations to come, and how do you make it so that that capital doesn't twist and contort the message and the mission? Well, I'll run through it real quick. Essentially, it's about commons transition financing. And this works by an investor putting money into a fund for a specific bioregion. They're issued shares or tokens called commons credits, which are correlated one-to-one to the land and are used to buy the land. And everything I'm talking about is just about the land layer. From there, the stewardship entity, like the Regen CLT model I just showed, governs and manages the land. The profits derived from the land through non-extractive means are distributed to shareholders, one of the shareholders being the stewardship or governance entity. They use the profits to buy back shares from the patrons. Over time, it transitions ownership from these private individuals to the stewardship entity, and a commons transition is accomplished. And the key here is that the ownership of the land, the governance of the land, and the use of the land are treated differently. And in conventional models, if you own the land, you call the shots, you basically could do whatever you want. But this system actually says, no, these are all distinct stakeholders, and we should treat them differently. And so this separates the ownership and profit interest from governance control, which is critical. So breezing through all this, onto the chapter 3. So really, we went through governance and then financing, and we started to look then at implementation, and we realized we've been talking to these groups around the world with these amazing place-based projects for years. But we were seeing screenshots of Google Earth with pins dropped, and people couldn't tell the story. We're talking about landscape scale complexity. And so we knew that something needed to happen to help convey and weave all of this together in a better way. And so we got into mapping. I recently came back from a bioregional initiative in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta of Colombia. This is in the north of Colombia, and it's a very complex and beautiful, very special region. Right there in the center is the snow-capped mountains of the Sierra Nevada. This is the largest coastal mountain in the world. It's got the shortest river from snow-capped peaks to the ocean. And it has 4 indigenous tribes that live in this area: the Arhuaco, the Kogis, the Wiwa, and the Kankwama. And we spent time with the Arhuaco, learning from them and working with them on how to do regenerative community development in this region, in this bioregion. And so if I pull up this next layer here, and we can see 2 things. So for one, there's this area known as the Black Line. It's a recognized indigenous reserve. This is their area within the Black Line and extends to the sea. And the other layer we brought on top of this is the ecoregion or bioregional node layer that I mentioned earlier. So you can see from the top, the snow-capped mountains, the Paramo, going down to the montane forests and the dry forests and the xeric scrublands. You even have pockets of mangroves in there. But it's a way to look at a bioregion and say, what different forces are at play, what different ecologies are present in the system, and how they relate to one another. Moving forward, we can see river systems, a little hard to see with this lighting, but primary rivers and secondary river systems all coming out from the central mountain here and spreading through the landscape. Another hydrological perspective, switching from rivers to watersheds, level 9 watersheds. And now we can start to see all of these different dynamics in the landscape. Going beyond ecology to a governance perspective, we can see all the different Colombian administrative divisions. And then in green, we have the actual protected indigenous reserve, which does not fill up the whole black line. That's just a recognized territory. From there, we can go into more of the negative aspects. These are the mining pressures. You can see they're right on the black line, encroaching into this sacred indigenous territory. The red is active mining titles. The yellow is areas that are under active exploration, and the grayed out areas are just available. Another layer we can bring in is looking at human modification. So seeing all around those hot spots are the modified environment, and basically the protected areas that are darker are the ones in the heart of the reservation, and the ones on the outside are heavily degraded, either by farming or industry or anything like that. So all of these different forces present in the landscape can start to really paint a picture of how to make impact here. What are these key leverage points and how can it inform the strategy? Because building maps like this, especially with the complexity of project in a complex region that's dealing with paramilitary forces and mining pressures and farmers that are cutting down the trees, this is a communication medium that goes beyond any language. And we literally had a three-way communication between the Iku native language, Spanish, and English. And when we brought these maps up, the whole conversation became alive. And so impact mapping is a way to weave together not only better decision-making internally, but then communicating it to other stakeholders and project partners going forward. Thank you.
But we know now, if we didn't for how important working from a bioregional lens is, and this is actually a beautiful kind of culmination or summation of the regenerative agriculture track this morning, where we've heard some like mind-blowing innovations. We've heard from Mark, we've heard about kind of the large-scale policy work. From Daniela, we heard about how we have to have an economic innovation or economic innovation as well. From Egypt, we heard about whole new systems. But if that's not all actually grounded in bioregionalism, then we're working kind of against the way that Earth naturally works. So really appreciate that you're doing that work, because without that kind of cartography, we're working blind, we're working in ignorance, and maybe even against each other. And this for me is a big unlock to us actually working cohesively in coherence. So thank you so much. Very quickly, how can we help?
So we are actively seeking new clients to work with. If that resonated, definitely reach out. We can do projects on all scales. This was a larger, zoomed out project, but smaller ones work as well. And we're also raising capital. So,
Okay. Thank you so much.